Namaste and welcome to today's session. I've been running around to get to this session. so, so I have a topic for today. And what should we start off with? Should we start with the topic for today or should we start with some sitting practice? I think let's do a short sitting practice. Not for any other reason, but it will help me to settle down a bit and so purely for very selfish reasons. And then we will talk about the topic for today. Okay, so let's sit comfortably wherever you are. You can change your position and just be comfortable and take a nice long deep breath in and exhale. And as you exhale, with every exhalation, just let go. Let go of whatever the mind is clutching onto. Let go of whatever the mind is holding on to. Let go of whatever the mind is preoccupied with, just for a few moments. Just completely become devoid of the need to hold on to something, to resist something, or to achieve something, or to acquire something. Whatever's playing on the mind, just for these next few moments, just simply let go and surrender. Imagine that whatever is happening is an expression of life or expression of the universe. The life situations that are there currently. It's all a play of existence and nature. And imagine for the next few moments that whatever is unfolding, is an unfoldment of the universe. It's an unfoldment of life. There is no you who needs to manage his life. There is no you who needs to control her life. There is no you that needs to figure out his life. There's simply life as it is. So just relax into being, into presence, and just be. The way to just be is to just be with what is. The breath, the movement of the body, the sensations on the body, in the body, the feelings or emotions, or the thoughts. Just allow whatever is to be. Whatever is how the universe wants it to be. This is how life wants it to be. How existence wants it to be. How nature wants it to be. So simply breathe into what's happening and just be. If the mind wanders into thoughts, gently take note of it. And as one realizes that one is lost in thoughts, then one naturally comes back into presence and awareness. Don't make a great effort to be aware, because awareness is always there. The more you relax, the more you let go. Naturally, one comes into awareness and presence. Simply breathing, simply experiencing, simply sensing. Remember, one can come back into awareness and presence anytime during the day. All one needs to do is remember to be present. In whatever one is doing, one could be having a cup of tea with presence. One could be going for a walk as presence. One could be brushing his teeth as presence. This essentially means consciously stopping the stream of unconscious thoughts and just being present. When the mind is silent, there is simple awareness of what is. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take another deep breath in and exhale. Gently rub your palms and cup your eyes. Okay, so welcome back. And just very short sitting practice. Sometimes one doesn't need to really sit for an hour of doing meditation. I think what's more effective, if you really ask me, in terms of the practice of awareness, rather than do like 1 hour, which is actually not, I'm not recommending that you should not do 1 hour of meditation. There was a time in my life, like for I think a good 4 to 5 years, every day religiously, I would meditate for 2 hours. I don't do that anymore. But I think what has happened now that awareness has become a habit, really speaking. So it's just become just like I think unconscious thinking becomes a habit over a period of a lifetime. Perhaps we have inherited this unconscious thinking since lifetimes, who knows? But similarly, when we begin the practice of awareness, we change the direction uh, of our attention from unconscious thinking to presence. Then, over a period of time, presence becomes a habit. I think now it's very difficult not to be present. It's very difficult to be unconsciously thinking because most of the time there are really not many thoughts. Most of the time the mind is silent or it's doing what it's doing. And even if there are unconscious thoughts, there is great awareness. It's almost like no thought can pass through without you noticing that that thought has passed through. I think that's what presence does. It's not that the unconscious thinking doesn't happen ever, it happens, but there is great awareness. Every thought is noticed, so to speak. Earlier, the radio is going on and on and on and on, and one doesn't even realize that one is lost in thought. There is no space uh, between thoughts. One is identified, one is fused with the thoughts and the character of the thoughts and the story the thought creates. So yeah, as I was saying, I think it's also a good thing if one can practice presence at short intervals. Like, in dieting, they say that rather than have like a big full meal, have smaller meals at quick intervals. That helps in enhancing your metabolism. And you then, that's much better because you don't accumulate more fat as such. So I think the same thing I would recommend for the practice of awareness. Have shorter periods of practice at quicker intervals. That's what I would recommend. And this is an interesting analogy with the dieting thing. So rather than having, sit for 1 hour, 2 hours, which if you have the time and luxury for sitting for 1, 2 hours, then go ahead, do it, no problem. But it's good if you can integrate in the practice. Like supposing you're brushing your teeth, that could be a practice in awareness. Let's say you're going for a walk, that could be a practice in awareness. Maybe you're having a meal, that could be a practice in awareness. So, or else you can have an alarm that rings every 1 hour or 2 hours, then you take a break and come into awareness. So I think that, because then you're integrating awareness in your life. It's not like, okay, separate time for spirituality and meditation and rest of the time unconscious thinking. So I think that's what I would recommend. Mm, and in some ways, I think what I'm talking about is linked to what I want to talk about today. And what I really want to talk about today is three signs of spiritual growth. Mm. Now, before I talk about the three signs, or like if these three qualities are happening in our life, then there is one could say that one is growing spiritually. Having said that, before I talk about the three qualities of spiritual growth, I don't know which is a better word, three signs of spiritual growth or three qualities of spiritual growth. Anyway, um, I want to talk about this word spiritual growth itself. Personally, I do not prefer the word spiritual. Neither do I use the prefer the word growth. Uh, but it's the simplest thing for me to communicate what I want to really say. So, because spiritual makes you believe that there is um like spiritual life, like spirituality, which is different from material life or materialism. Because I think these are distinctions which are created by the mind and by vocabulary. Really speaking, life is just life. Life doesn't say, oh, I am spiritual life, I'm a material life. This is just life made up of sensations, made up of thoughts, made up of emotions, made up of life events. So there is no distinction as such with life is saying that, oh, this is spiritual life and this is material life. Having said that, also for practical purposes, I understand when you are doing certain practices, following certain principles that help to sort of enhance awareness, help to quieten the mind, maybe that could considered as a spiritual life, so to speak. But I really don't like to divide life into material life, spiritual life. Life is just life. And the other was the word growth. I think over a period of time, naturally, of course, the nature of life is growth and transformation. Uh, mm, the body is changing, the beliefs are changing, nature is undergoing a change and transformation, the seasons are changing, day and night. So, of course, the only thing constant is change. Um, but when it comes to s- so-called spirituality, really growth is an oxymoron word, because really what's the practice? The practice is presence and awareness. Where is presence and awareness? Now. And when I use the word growth, then what the mind is doing, it is projecting a future version of myself and saying that the current version of myself is not good enough and I need to grow into a much better ideal version of myself. Oh, like I'm not loving enough, I need to become more loving. Oh, I'm not uh, I'm I am very angry person, I need to be less angry. So this is an indication of growth. This is the current reality versus what can be an ideal reality. But really, if you really look at presence and awareness, there's no element of growth. It's always the now. There is no now. Now, one could say, oh, I have become over a period of time, I've become better at being in the now. I've become better at being in the presence. One could say that. But really, I think this word growth tends to make the mind get into an evaluation and assessment mode. And I've seen that in my own experience. People who are in spirituality tend to compare themselves according to how they were in the past. Oh, now I'm more kind, I'm more present, I'm more aware, I'm this and that. Yes, that could be the case, but quite often this evaluation, that comparison over time is really not needed, because again, that's an identity. Oh, this is how I was in the past, now this is how I am. The identity still remains. That was the identity, and now this is the identity. I'm looking to create a new, better identity. That's not the whole purpose of mm, spirituality, which is presence, which is awareness, realizing that you're not this identity create the mind, the purposes gets lost. The other thing is, there's also a lot of evaluation and comparison with other people. Look, oh, that person is so unaware, this person. And I've seen spiritual people tend to be very self-righteous, very moralistic, very mm, feel that they are something special and others. I think that also tends to happen. So why the need to evaluate yourself based on your past? Why do you need to evaluate yourself in comparison to other people? So hence this word growth itself becomes like ambitiousness, like career growth, spiritual growth. So which is why I don't really prefer this word. Having said that, for practical purposes, yes, I'm using this word spiritual growth because it's simple and everyone can understand, but I have explained why I don't prefer these two words. So coming to what are the three indicators, I think one, when more presence happens, if I have to use a word, I think more than spiritual growth, I can write when more presence happens. The first sign is silence. And what do I mean by silence? I think the more we become present, actually, which is also an oxymoron because there's no one becoming present. Uh, the more there is disidentification with thoughts, I think that's a better word. The more there is awareness, greater silence happens. Now, what do I mean by that? Is essentially the mind is chattering all the time. Even though I've not done any survey, I think 99.9% of human beings, 99.9% of the time are living in their minds. A general thing I feel. So what happens, and when greater presence happens, greater awareness happens, the mind becomes silent. And silence becomes more prevalent or the predominant state of the mind as opposed to mental chatter. So the difference is, it's almost like, imagine like there are two banks of the river. One bank of the river is where one was before awareness or presence happened. There's chatter, 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 chatter. Hardly any silence of the mind. So as morning as you get up, it starts. The radio starts chatter, 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 chatter. right till the night. Uh, and then we say that, oh, I am thinking. Where are you thinking? The thinking is happening by itself. You're imagining that you're thinking. So, and hardly is there any space between thoughts because it's continuous, 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 continuous. It's like an ongoing thing. It's like, and it's all jumbled. So this is what happens, and this is also I'm talking from my own personal experience. This is how the mind was. And then with greater presence awareness, you come to the other bank of the river where there is just the mind is silent. And one is comfortable with the silence. And one is not trying to fill the silence with some activity, some noise, or something, It's almost like when two people are sitting with each other, and if there is silence, then there is generally a discomfort, and we need to say something to fill in that silence. Um, and even with our own self, when we are in our own company, there is nothing, and there's just then quite often people feel like, how can I be alone? I have nothing to do. I need to do something. I need to watch a movie. I need to talk to someone. I need to, we are afraid of the silence. That a silence is not a silence of fullness of being. That's a silence of void, because the mind feels threatened by silence. Like there's void. There's what do I do? And the mind needs to fill itself with something. So, with greater presence and awareness, now with greater spiritual growth, I'm using the word spiritual growth, there is greater silence. And it's not that the thoughts don't come, but earlier there was thoughts all the time, maybe a glimpse of silence here and there, a space between thoughts. But now there is mostly silence, and then there are some thoughts. Like mostly the sky is clear, and then some cloud passes by, and then that cloud is also noticed. But earlier, unconscious mind, it's fully cloudy. There's the sky cannot be seen. So I think that's the first indicator, the first sign that spiritual growth, presence, awareness is happening. Silence. And also comfortableness with silence. Then one is not trying to fill the silence with some activity or whatever. Like you could be just sitting, watching, being, noticing. You can notice the mountains, the trees, or you can even notice the cream walls in front of you. You can notice the chair, you can notice the cupboard, you can notice the curtain. You don't have to notice something profound like, oh, the sunset and the sunrise and the moon and the stars. Wherever you are, just you're noticing, okay, the ceiling fan, you're noticing. So you become just comfortable with silence. You just can just be. And at the same time, the silence is also not an addictive. You're not attached to the silence. This is one of the things that happens. That when people move to spirituality, they tend to get addicted and attached to silence. So they want to always have experience that oneness, peace, silence. So whenever there is chaos or lack of silence or noise, whether it's in the external world or in the inner world, then there is a resistance to that. Like like I recently met somebody who manages a cafe, and uh, there were a group of people there, and they were making kind of a little bit of noise, not really a ruckus. And I could sense from his face that he was feeling kind of uncomfortable, but he was not saying uh, anything. And then I spoke to him. I said, "What was happening? I felt you were not." Say, "Yeah, I can't manage noise. I want this peace. I want silence, and I want quietness." So that often happens. Then you become attached to always having just silence, because if you're living a life, there will be time then people are making noise and now it's beyond your control. Maybe there is some construction work going on and then that noise is there. It's because then we do not accept, we become attached to no mind, we become attached to silence. This becomes another attachment. This is attachment to, in yogic terms, if I were to use, this is that three different kinds of states of the mind. One is the state of the mind which is very dull, lethargic, tamas, which is another state of mind is very hyperactive, rajas. Third state of mind is very calm and balanced and equanimous, that's sattva. While this is the state of mind one needs to cultivate, the one of the problems with sattva is you get attached to sattva, that always want to have peace, I want to have balance, I want to have quietness, I want to have this. And anything that comes in the way of that peace, quietness, it creates agitation. So one of the signs of spiritual growth is, while the mind is naturally silent, but if there is lack of silence, if there is some disturbance outside, inside, one does not mind the mind. It's fine. It's like, theek hai. You have no aversion to noise, so to speak. If some thoughts come, if there is some disturbance for some time, that's fine. There's disturbance for some time. Natural state, the mind, that is automatically it comes into silence. But if there is some disturbance outside, inside, that's fine. One is not disturbed by the disturbance. One just simply is aware of the disturbance. I think that's a very important thing to really note. One is there's disturbance and you're disturbed by the disturbance. That's a reaction to the disturbance. Other is there's disturbance and you're simply aware of the disturbance. So I think when presence happens, you're simply aware of the disturbance. You're not disturbed by the disturbance. You get disturbed by the disturbance when you say this disturbance should not be there. Oh, I don't want this. You're just fine. You're present with this. So I think that's the one of the first signs, which is silence, which is not disturbed by lack of silence. So that's the first sign of spiritual growth, presence, awareness. I hope people don't start using these three signs as like trying to now assess themselves. Oh, how much I've grown spiritually, because again, that's the nature of the mind. But I think it's just indicators for sometimes those milestone indicators help. But I hope the milestone indicators don't don't become tools for the mind to start creating an identity and start saying, oh, now I've grown this much, and then the purpose of this would be lost. So that's the first sign, which is silence. The second sign of greater awareness, presence, spiritual growth is serenity. Now, what do I mean by serenity? Serenity is basically acceptance of what is, which means whatever is, there is no resistance to it. It doesn't mean that one does not do something. Like if something is happening which is not pleasant, one is not saying that this unpleasantness should not happen. One just simply is accepting of that unpleasantness, whether it's inner or outer. And then what needs to be done is done. It doesn't become passiveness that now I have to be with unpleasantness and because I'm spiritual, I need to. Now, if there is unpleasantness, then if there is something within your control, then try to change it, because why would you want to be with unpleasantness? And if it's something which is not in your control, then just one has to accept it. But there is no suffering in this whole process. There is no resistance. Suffering is an outcome of resistance, that something is happening and I'm resisting it. And that is creating the suffering. So when there is greater presence and awareness, there is no suffering. because there is simple acceptance of what is. And if something needs to be done, it gets done. And if one cannot do something about it, then there is acceptance about it. So that, and because of that nature or that attitude, that leads to serenity. Because there is no serenity, I would say, is the opposite of suffering. Suffering is resistance to what is. Serenity is acceptance of what is. The another attribute of serenity is that there is no seeking. There is no longer seeking something, an outcome based on which is like really based on which the identity defines itself. Now that seeking could be in the realm of like, oh, I want to become a CEO of a company. I want to become, and then because the ego identity feels that it will become someone if it becomes a CEO of a company. And that same ambitiousness can get carried into spirituality. Oh, I want to become enlightened, or I want to become self-realized. And that same ambitiousness is spills over into. So, and it's not that one does not have goals in life. Yes, you can have goals, like it could be a simple, like I want to write a book, I want to get it published, I want to make it reach around to as many. It's a natural self-expression, a natural goal. But if I have this, no, I want to be a best-selling author, or you know maybe you become a best-selling author, but you are not defined by, like, if I become a best-selling author, then there is something extraordinary about me. You are not defined by becoming someone. Yes, you may become that, but it's basically there is a natural expression of that silence in some activity. and and the purpose is not to acquire something. The purpose is not to seek something, whether that seeking is in the realm of some material thing, or a spiritual thing. So there is no seeking. The mind is not projecting something, an ideal state in the future, and then hoping if this ideal state in the future fructifies or comes into reality, then I will feel fulfilled. The sense of fulfillment is already there here and now. I think that's the right way to put it. The sense of fulfillment is not because I will get something in the future. Yes, one continues to do whatever has to do as a natural expression, and one may get something in the future, but then it's not like I'm seeking fulfillment by getting something in the future or becoming someone in the future. The fulfillment is here and now. So when the fulfillment is here and now, there's a feeling of serenity. And the third flavor of serenity is there is no holding on to something. There's no attachment to something. And life is nothing but a series of changes. Something happens, some person comes into your life, and then maybe some person goes out of your life after some time. Maybe some, life is constantly changing all the time. So one is neither resisting that, okay, this is coming about in my life, that's fine. Now this is going in out of my life, so that's fine. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you give up everything. Yeah, you have a house for practical purposes, um, you may have a car, you may have whatever, but it's not something that, what do you say? It does not define you. Your possessions don't define you. Your relationships don't define you. I think that's a good way to put it. So, yeah, maybe, and also I think, like, if if there is a sense of attachment, and if something is leaving, then there's no resistance to it, that I need to hold on to it. I should not let it go. I just want, there's like, fine. If something is whether it could be a material thing, whether it could be a relationship or whatever. And there may be a disturbance. One is acknowledges the disturbance, that acknowledges maybe some fear comes up, maybe some anxiety comes up, maybe some sadness comes up, and just acknowledges it. But one does not try to hold on to something forcefully. Mm. Sometimes, this what quite celebrated is trying to make things work. I i think greater presence is not trying to make things work. I think greater presence just makes us so much effortless and easy and simple. And I think even the discipline or the commitment towards something comes naturally. It is not a mind enforced discipline and a commitment. like i like I publish articles every week or a YouTube it's something which just comes naturally to me. I don't like, oh, I have to do it, and this, sometimes I may miss a week or whatever, because or whatever reason, but there is a consistency to it. Why is the consistency? Because it comes naturally to me. It is not enforced. I'm trying hard to do it. Maybe there's a time for hardness and effortness, but with greater awareness and presence, there is just no holding on, no forcefulness goes away. I think the masculine energy, the yang energy of trying to get things done, and becomes more yin energy. It's more yin, and it's more fluid, and it's more organic. It's more just flowing with the movement of life. It's almost like it's not even flowing with the movement of life. It's becoming one with life, and just so I think that's the second aspect of uh, greater presence and awareness, which is serenity. And the three things about serenity are: one, there is no resistance to what is. It doesn't mean one is passive. One does what needs to be done. And if it cannot be done, then there's a simple acceptance. The second is there is no seeking any outcome or goal or wanting to become, that the fulfillment is already in what is, and that expresses itself in whatever way and form. And whatever has to happen happens as an expression of that. Like I say, quite often, most people, when they are identified with the mind, their expression comes from insecurity and lack. They feel because if they get something or they achieve something, they will become someone and they will fulfill themselves. And it's a never ending process. The cup always remains empty. Whereas with greater presence and greater spiritual growth, the cup is already full. What is it full with? Full with your own presence and your own being. So whatever is expression is an expression of that fullness, that expression of, or like, I don't need something to fulfill me, but I'm already full. I'm just expressing my fullness. And that's where this creativity, spontaneity, and all of that comes in. You're not trying to do something to fulfill yourself. Whatever you do is an expression of fulfillment. So that's the difference. And the third thing is, the serenity also comes because you're not trying to hold on to something or really trying to make something work. It's like easy. If something comes in life, it comes. If something goes from the life, that's fine, because that's the moment of life. That's how life is. It keeps changing. You're not trying to hold on to it. So those are the two signs. The first is silence, less chatter, mental chatter, more presence, mm, and no aversion to lack of silence. Also, that's another important part of silence. Second sign is serenity, which is no resistance, no seeking, no attachment. Third, the third quality or sign of greater presence, awareness, spiritual growth is another S. And so all these are beginning with S. Silence, serenity, and the third is spontaneity. Now, what do I mean by spontaneity? Spontaneity means basically, with greater presence, life becomes very, very spontaneous. There is hardly any premeditated preparation. It's most of it, whatever you do is, it becomes spontaneous, it becomes very authentic, it becomes very intuitive, it becomes very creative. Mm, in whatever work you may do. Mm. Because you're not, the nature of the mind is, it is um, it is analytical, it is profit oriented, it is gain oriented, it is always the nature of the mind, it's calculated. Yeah, I think that's the right word. The nature of the mind, that it is calculated, it is always calculating, okay, what's the profit in this, what's the loss in this, how will I gain from this, how will I lose from this. The nature of the mind, it's political, it's like it's a politician, it's always looking for what's the benefit. And the nature of the mind, like a good politician, will never say that I'm doing it for me. Oh, I'm doing it for the country. Oh, I'm doing it for the party. I'm doing it for society. None of the politicians ever say that they have any selfish agenda. They are all, politicians are selfless, and that's the way the mind is. It is constantly focusing on itself, but it will never talk about itself. Oh, like I know of somebody who's a head of a spiritual organization, and then um, has a nice lifestyle come from the revenue that comes from that organization, but there's no acknowledgement uh, that there are personal needs, and that personal needs are also important. No, whatever I'm doing it for the organization. um, that's the ego of egolessness. So this is the nature of the mind. It does not want to, it functions purely for itself, but that's the shadow side of the mind. Whether it needs power, whether it needs fame, whether it needs recognition, whether it needs love of others, whether it needs to be considered right, whether it needs to have a good lifestyle, whatever it is, the mind functions for itself, but it will never acknowledge that it is doing it for itself, because it wants to, no, I'm selfless. So this is the way the mind plays games. So when greater presence happen, whether greater awareness happens, when greater spiritual growth happens, then there is spontaneity and authenticity. There is no calculationness. वो जो है वो है. There is simple expression. There is, and because there is clarity, because there is silence, it's almost like the universe expresses itself. Now, whether it's creativity, creativity is not something one thinks and becomes creative. Creativity happens in the moment. Like most of my sessions that I record, I have no clue that what I'm going to talk in the whole session. I only know, okay, to this topic. Sometimes I don't even have a particular topic. It just emerges. But the examples, the anecdotes, or whatever sharing happens by itself. Uh, it's not like I'm writing and preparing, and it's just a natural expression. And that natural, one also then doesn't want to play any more games also in personal relationship. One wants simple transparency, authenticity. One doesn't want uh, want to play games and power games and relationship and all that stuff that happens. That's all the stuff of the mind. And one mind, the maybe you will then gravitate naturally towards relationships which are simple, authentic, genuine, easy. And you will naturally maybe um, distance yourself without really having to make an effort from relationships that seem very cumbersome and tiresome and high maintenance and too much of thinking and all that stuff. So that is how spontaneity is. And spontaneity is also authenticity, it's also honesty, where you're not looking at मेरे को इससे फायदा क्या होगा, ये बोल के फायदा क्या होगा, या इससे नुकसान क्या होगा. It just simply is. It doesn't mean that one is not there is, one loses a sense of appropriateness, what to say at what time and how much to say. When that awareness is there, that wisdom is there, but there is, one doesn't compromise his honesty or authenticity for the sake of some future gain or loss. And if there is lack of authenticity, then there's great discomfort because that just doesn't feel right. So that's the other aspect of uh, higher presence, greater awareness, that there is spontaneity. And there is also tremendous creativity that happens when one is more present, because that creativity may spill out in writing, that creativity may spill out in whatever aspect one may take. Maybe you're teaching yoga, or you are doing some cooking, because the nature of life is to be creative. And what stops the creativity is the conditioning of the mind, which says, no, I don't want to be creative, I want to be successful. Like today only, I heard somebody was talking about some relative of hers, and this person was saying that mm, this relative wanted to um, always write. Uh, Whenever she went into the library, she picked up three books, and one of them would always be a romantic novel. And she always wanted to write love stories, romance or something. And but she curbed her natural spontaneous thing to write love stories, because she didn't want people to see her as frivolous. Mm. She wanted people to see her as somebody who's respectful, somebody who's serious, somebody who's. So, hence, she wrote books about medicine, about other serious uh, topics, but not the. Even though she was naturally inclined, and she even did express that, I would love to write uh, uh, romantic stories and love stories, but no, I don't want people to see me like this person who's frivolous. So hence I want to write about serious topics, because I want the respect of people. So this is the mind. It is wanting something, and hence it's curbing its natural self-expression. There's nothing wrong in writing love stories. I think if that's what you want to, how you want to express yourself. It's like Enid Blyton saying that, look, I don't want to write children's stories because I don't want people to see me as um, a childish storyteller. I want to be serious. So hence I want to write serious novels like Leo Tolstoy. Leo Tolstoy is a Leo Tolstoy, or Enid Blyton is Enid Blyton. J.K. Rowling is a J.K. Rowling. Everyone has their own natural self-expression, and the more you are naturally spontaneous and authentic, because they can sense your authenticity, they can sense your vibe that you're giving. And the more you're trying to be putting on a image or a face because of this is how I want to be perceived by people, you lose that sense of honest connection with your own self and also with others. In fact, thinking of J.K. Rowling, and then how she didn't have any money, and then she started writing the Harry Potter series, sitting in some diner or cafe, and then of course the rest is history. What if J.K. Rowling said, "No, I don't want to write all this magic fantasy stuff. I want to be taken seriously"? She would probably not have made the kind of wealth she did, and never impacted the world. So one needs to just listen to, and this is what happens with greater presence, because all the mental clutter and all the conditioning on all the external validation, need for validation, sort of drops away. And then there's just this silence, and there's this fulfillment in your own being. And that fulfillment expresses itself in its natural, spontaneous manner, whatever that may be. Mm. And if I were to use the example, since I'm talking about writing, it could be expressing itself in writing Enid Blyton stories. It could be expressing itself in writing fantasy, J.K. Rowling, or it could be expressing itself in epics like Leo Tolstoy and all that heavy so-called stuff, because world has a place for all kind of expression. You have to find out what is my natural expression, and actually you also don't have to find out. Once the mind is silent, once there is that serenity and fulfillment in your own being, then the natural expression will come of its own accord. You don't have to go find looking for it. So I think those are the three simple indicators, sign of how much there is silence, how much there is serenity, and how much there is spontaneity. So these are the three indicators or sign of, I think, spiritual growth. Greater the inner silence, mm, greater the serenity, and greater the spontaneity. That's an indication that there's greater presence and awareness. Mm. Okay, so yeah, I think again the purpose of this is not to now start evaluating and assessing yourself. Oh, how much is, like, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much? I think it's just sometimes it's just good to also know these qualities or signs, uh, because also I think they also act like milestones. They help you to give you a sense of direction also. So let's end the session with a small spontaneous prayer. I think in a way, I think my sessions, there is an element of dhyana, which is sitting practice. There's an element of jnana, which is all the talking stuff. And there's an element of uh, bhakti, devotion, because I generally end with a prayer. So sit comfortably, close your eyes if you wish, join your palms in namaste. My dear higher self, help me to be comfortable with what is. Help me to realize that silence is not a threat to my existence, that it's the very nature of my existence. In silence, life reveals itself as is. Help me to simply be, accepting the current reality without wanting to change it, regulate it, control it, resist it. Because the nature of life is change itself. So without me necessarily trying to do it, change is happening all the time. Help me to be one with the change, experience the serenity that comes in being one with what's happening. And last but not the least, help me to get in touch with my own authenticity so I can sing my own song, write my own book, dance to my own tune without the need for external validation, approval, fame, just the joy of expressing my true self. And last but not the least, help me to just practice presence without constantly evaluating and assessing myself to see how much I have grown based on my past or in comparison to others. I seek your grace and guidance in realizing that you and me are not different, but one. Om Shanti Shanti. Okay, so with that, we end today's sessions. I will see you in the next session. Goodbye. God bless. Take care.